Welcome to Political Statistics. My name is Harun Atcha, and I'll be your instructor for this course. Though you probably won't see me like this again for the rest of the class, I think it's important to start off this semester by putting a face to the name. I think it's also important that you see that I'm just a normal person and not some machine that eats, sleeps, and breathes statistics. See, I know that statistics can be an intimidating topic, but I'm excited to introduce it to you in a way that's a little bit more approachable. I think part of that involves me being more approachable too, hence this video. So at any point in the semester, if you find yourself struggling with the material, don't hesitate to reach out. And know that on the other end of that email is a person, me, who wants to help and wants to see you use and appreciate statistics to its fullest capacity. Let's get started. In this lecture, we'll go over a few things. First, I'll briefly introduce myself. Next, I'll talk about how this class will be run. Then, we'll go over what you might get out of this course. Then, we'll start building a foundation for the politics side of political statistics before talking about why we focus so much on political theory in this course. Finally, we'll summarize and conclude for the day. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Harun Atcha, and I received my PhD in political science from Arizona State University in 2020. While I was a student, I studied ethnic conflict and the role the internet plays in facilitating it. During my last semester of graduate school and for some time afterwards, I worked as a researcher at Salt Lake Community College, where I used statistics and qualitative methods to answer questions about education. I was a community college student myself, so I've always been very fond of the mission of open access institutions. After working at SLCC, I've worked as a data scientist at several companies. I've worked on forecasting, classification, survey design and analysis, as well as core statistical issues like causal inference. If those things don't mean much to you, no problem. Suffice it to say, I've done a lot of statistical and qualitative research in a lot of different contexts. Let's talk about how this class is run. There are a few important things that I'd like to bring to your attention. First, that there is no textbook for this class. Often, textbooks are needlessly expensive and are a poor reference once you've finished the course, and frankly, they're boring. Instead, I've assigned a substantive reading each week that you can find in Canvas. These readings are often chapters from books, important political science or sociology articles, or even reports from nonprofits focused on a specific issue. I think this approach is superior to making you buy a textbook, because it's not only cheaper, but gives you a better sense of how statistics are used, and frankly, what types of statistics are compelling. Second, there's a specific cadence that I'd like you to follow when tackling the material each week. First, try to read the assigned passage, then watch the video lecture, then go through the lab, and finally work on your assignment. As we'll discuss a little later in this intro, it's important that you have the conceptual questions in mind as we go through the technical parts of the class. While you can do a lot of technically impressive analysis without knowing anything about important concepts, all important questions are theoretically driven. As such, it's important for you to be thinking about these broader questions and how they will influence the decisions you'll be making while you do your statistical analysis. This is, after all, a political statistics course, and I think we should keep the politics of our endeavor at the forefront. Thirdly, all the points in this class come from 5 assignments and 1 final report. For the 5 assignments, I'll look to see that your code runs without error and that you get the right answer. There may be many ways for you to arrive at that answer, and I'm not too concerned about how you get there, as long as it's clear that you've thought about how to organize your code and that ultimately you get to the right place. For the final assignment, I'd like to see you tackle a topic that matters to you. Throughout the course, we'll be touching on lots of topics, from voter turnout to higher education equity gaps to protest frequency. But at the end of the day, I want you to find or create a dataset, articulate your own theory and hypotheses, and undertake your own analysis to shed light on your question. Your final report will be graded on thoroughness, insight, and cogency of your analysis. I don't care what topic you choose, but whatever topic you end up with, give it a good effort. Next, let's talk about the tools we'll use in this class. We'll use R as our programming language of choice. First, because it's free and open source, meaning that it won't cost you anything to use the tool in this class or in the future, like Stata or SPSS might. Second, R and Python are the two most widely used languages in data science in industry today. If you want to pursue a statistics-related career post-college, you'll likely find that your familiarity with R to be an asset. Third, while Python and R are very similar, I think R has a few nicer libraries for data wrangling and visualization. That said, if you're familiar with Python, the transition should be fairly painless, and if you're completely new to any programming language, the learning curve for R isn't too steep. Finally, we'll use the dplyr and ggplot packages to wrangle and visualize data respectively. The former makes your code highly readable and is easy to learn, while the latter is a very robust way of thinking about and visualizing your results. In this class, there's an extra emphasis on visualizing your results, because I've found that your boss will rarely care if your results are statistically significant, but they do care if your bar charts look nice. Let's talk about what you can expect to get out of this class. As suggested by the previous discussion about tools, a part of what you'll get from this class includes marketable skills. You are probably attending college primarily so that you can earn a bigger paycheck when you finish. Simply put, the ability to understand and use basic statistics to create data visualizations is in high demand, and jobs like data scientist and data analyst are well paid. But money isn't the only reason to pursue higher education. I'd say that it's more important to have a well-rounded and critical training so that you can approach and interpret the world as a healthy citizen, an active member of your community. To that end, you'll gain basic numeracy skills, familiarity with the foundations of statistical modeling, learn that statistics isn't magic, and where the limits of this type of analysis are. These are useful skills, not only because statistics are ever more widely used to justify and support policy positions, but because having these skills and employing them critically can help you be a more thoughtful, kind, and principled member of your community. Statistics alone doesn't make us good humans. Compassion and critique do. That's the whole conceit of the social sciences. With that lengthy introduction out of the way, let's start the material of this course. If you take nothing else from this week, remember this: concepts come before measurement. There is no way to get around this fundamental fact of social analysis. Giovanni Sartori in this week's reading makes that clear. If you try to approach social analysis from the opposite end, starting with measurement and going to concept, you end up with unclear concepts and bland, misleading insights. That's why Sartori notes the importance of methodology on the first page. Quote, "Concern over the logical structure and procedure of scientific inquiry," unquote, is important. We need to think about how we think about statistics. Rather than focusing on the techniques of statistics, that is, clustering algorithms, p-values, and iterative approaches to prediction, we need to focus on what we're measuring, why we're measuring it, and how the answers to those questions influence our measurement strategy. Let's consider the importance of doing conceptual groundwork before statistical analysis with a concrete example. Imagine that you start with a vague notion that you'd like to study the effect of race and ethnicity on educational outcomes. Given the renewed focus on issues of racial justice in the last few years, it's not unreasonable to think that some of you have given this topic some thought, and as college students, you're all personally invested in successful educational outcomes. So the intersection of the two might be interesting to you. The unconscious thinker, as Giovanni Sartori might call them, skilled in data analysis, might jump right into the problem by downloading several publicly available datasets. This unconscious, or in more charitable terms, overzealous thinker might then notice that these datasets already measure variables called race and ethnicity. They may further notice that these datasets report graduation rates for each of these groups. A hop, skip, and a bar chart later, they might have a data visualization that shows... Well, actually, what does it show? Since our unconscious thinker didn't put much time into defining their terms, namely race, ethnicity, and educational outcomes, it's unclear how we're supposed to interpret their admittedly beautiful bar charts. When our researcher talks about race and ethnicity, are they talking about micro-level genetic predispositions, like those that make Black Americans more likely to experience sickle cell anemia? Are they talking about individuals who are active participants and creators of some communal knowledge and practice? Are they talking about identity as people understand it themselves or as it's assigned to them? These are different aspects of racial and ethnic identity. Do the measures that our unconscious researcher used reflect one of those meanings? All of them? Without first conceptualizing what we mean, there's really no way to know. For what it's worth, most social scientists think of ethnic identity as something people ascribe to themselves, and as a body of practices and beliefs that they engage with, contribute to, receive, and reproduce over time. Genetic explanations for social outcomes are usually bad explanations, in part because there's next to no evidence that there are causal mechanisms that translate genetic differences into social outcomes, and because that's just not how society as a whole understands and reacts to perceived differences in race or ethnicity. But if we're unconscious about these things, our data analysis, no matter how sophisticated, will lead us astray and into this quagmire of ambiguity. By contrast, once we start thinking about concepts, we realize that statistics often isn't as objective as popular perceptions would have us believe. Our concepts inform how we measure things, and when we define our concepts differently, we get different measurements. Ideally, our concepts and measurements align closely, and the analysis that stems from them is consequently insightful and easy, or at least clear, to interpret. So let's bring this conversation about conscious and unconscious thinking back around to the substance of this class. I don't want your analysis in this class to get away from you. By that, I mean that I want you, throughout this class, to feel as if you are making choices about how and why to measure and visualize things. You should be actively thinking about how to interpret the work that you do. To that end, we're not going to focus on what I think are some of the more esoteric parts of statistics courses like t-tests and p-values. Instead, we'll focus on things like summary statistics, visualizations, and at the very end of this course, simple linear regression. These simple tools may not seem flashy relative to a lot of the modern data science suite, but we shouldn't use tools just because they're fancy. Use the simplest tool for the job and understand the limitations of that tool. With that, let's summarize. In this lecture, I introduced myself, went over the structure of the class, talked about the tools we'll use, mentioned what you might learn in the next few weeks, and then concluded with a discussion about conceptual clarity. Next, you'll want to tackle the first lab, where we get set up in R. I'm looking forward to tackling our next module, Module 2.